Good day, and welcome to General Ransford's Weekly Wraps. I'm Viv Govender, and as usual, what we'll do is we'll start off with a general market slash macroeconomic segment at the start, and then end off with a tech AI segment at the end. In our for this macro segment, we're going to cover basically elections, the South African election as well as the Indian election, and then look ahead at the US elections. And in our AI segment, we're going to look at China this week. We haven't looked at it in a while, so I thought it might be worth just getting a little deeper dive into what's happening in China and why it's important for anyone that's invested in AI. So let's start off with our elections, start. So three elections we're discussing: the South African election, the Indian election, and the upcoming US elections. You can even mention a little bit of the UK election, but that seems to be a foregone conclusion where the Tories, the current government, is going to lose quite dramatically. They are going to be replaced by Labour unless something dramatic happens, and I mean something unbelievably dramatic happens in the near future. The Tories are going to be the worst they've been for a long time. The Labour is going to be the strongest they've been, even maybe stronger than what they were under Tony Blair. In fact, the Tories may be so weak that Nigel Farage's Reform Party, which is basically a more right-wing Tory party, more right to the Tory party, not more right to the Tory party, but more to the right of the Tory party, something more akin to the Republicans in the US than to normal politics in, say, for instance, the UK or Europe. Might even win a few seats from the Tories. So yeah, that is the situation in the UK. Nothing much happening there. In South Africa, however, things are still in flux as I speak to you. The ANC, as you know, did not win a majority in the election. They were in fact significantly short of that, but they're still by far the largest party. They're almost twice the size of the next largest party. And that is obviously a situation which normally would indicate they would team up with one of the smaller parties and become the government. The problem is that the three choices that they have are not easy. The three choices are the DA, the EFF, or the MK. Now, the DA would be the easiest one from the market's point of view to accept. I think the market would actually rise quite significantly if the DA was the partner for the ANC. And in fact, that we're looking at a situation where if the DA was in partnership, even with someone like the IFP as well, along with them, maybe just give a bit of cover to the ANC, you'd be in a situation where obviously the rand significantly stronger than where it is right now, probably even breaking through 18. We might see the market, especially SA Inc. stocks, do a bit of a ramp up. Overall, from market point of view, very positive. However, I think the issues with the DA, which many people who watch this may not appreciate fully, is the real antipathy that much of the ANC's electorate have towards the DA. It is viewed as a racist party. It's viewed as a white party. I've even heard people talk about return to apartheid in like the Western Cape and that kind of stuff. Now, these things are a bit extreme. The one thing I want to point out is that there are not enough white people in South Africa to account for the DA's share of the vote. If every white person voted for the DA, they would not have 20+% of the vote. There's just not enough people. And especially when you consider the fact that people like parties like the Freedom Front Plus are getting 1.5% and so on. Now, one would assume that the majority actually of the DA's votership or voters are not actually white. So it's not the same, that piece of propaganda is not actually true. But the leadership, of course, is, white. It is got a perception that it is this more racist party. And so the ANC would probably find difficulty, not just within its party or whatever, but also within its electorate, teaming up with the DA. So that's one of the issues. Next is the MK. The problem with the MK is apparently the ANC called up the MK to say, let's talk about a possible coalition. The MK says, no, we'll call you. Don't call us, we'll call you. I don't know what exactly that means, but, Jacob Zuma is known for playing very aggressive games, for playing very aggressive strategies. And the idea of him going out against the IEC, the idea of him, making the kind of moves he's made in the last little while, it might blow up in his face, but historically he's done reasonably well with these things. So who knows what exactly he's planning around here, but don't count him out in terms of trying to pull off some kind of little coup. There's even the possibility that he might be able to team up with some of his former party mates at the ANC. I say former, he might still be an ANC member for all I know. Maybe have a coup against Cyril Ramaphosa and appoint one of his people as head of the ANC. That is still in flux. And then, of course, we have the EFF. The EFF, unfortunately, is slightly too small to make the deal on them alone. So it'll be the EFF plus somebody else. And I think there's issues with the EFF as well. I mean, until the MK came along, the EFF was the big boogeyman for the market. The ANC EFF, team up was considered to be the worst possible outcome. Now it's like the second worst possible outcome, I think, in the market point of view. Either the MK or EFF teaming up together would probably account for a market fall as well as a weakening of the currency. So those are the three main options. There are other possibilities where the ANC somehow is able to cobble together a majority with, for instance, all the little tiny parties out there. But I think that's going to be even more difficult because there's everything from basically, African Democratic Party, there's the BOSAs and the Action SAs, and there's the Freedom and Pluses, the IFPs, and so on. Getting something coherent out of those guys is going to be more difficult than making a deal with one big party, or maybe one big party and a smaller party. Okay. So that's the state of the South African elections state at the moment. So we don't really have a deal yet, but it's there's quite a number of possibilities as to what might be the final resolution to this. So moving on to the Indian election. Narendra Modi is still Prime Minister, still controls the government, but he did not win anywhere near as much as they'd hoped they'd win. In fact, he actually fell from the last election till now. In the last election, he achieved an outright majority. That means his party alone was more than 50% of the votes, so they could form the government on themselves without any partners. Now, they are not that. They are basically just a little short of 50% of the vote, but they have plenty of allies, and the alliance in those comments that they had was above 50%, and they are still going to form the party. However, the expectations for the BJP were so high that anything other than absolutely trouncing their enemies or their opponents was seen as a victory by the opponents. So the opponents, basically the major party, the Congress party, got less than half the votes of the BJP, significantly less than half the votes of the BJP. The BJP alone, without its allies, was still more than the Congress and all its allies put together. Okay, so it's a vastly one-sided deal. But the expectation had been that the BJP would have won almost all the votes, possibly getting more than a 2/3 majority with its alliance partners together, getting majority, full outright majority on its own. That obviously did not happen, and therefore, because expectations were so low for the opponents, they basically now look like they won, and the BJP, despite winning, looks like it lost just because it was expected to win by so much more. And the reason for this, a couple-fold. Firstly, obviously, there's the pure logistical stuff. If you have a couple of opponents running against you, they split their vote. If they can organize them, one person running against you in each jurisdiction, then you're more likely to basically lose. So the opponents basically have gone together and they've strategically made sure that if there's a possibility that they might cannibalize each other's votes to the extent that BJP wins, they've stopped doing that, and so therefore maximize their vote share. The next thing is that the BJP has, not just the first time, this has happened back in 2004 as well, overestimated just how much economic growth translates into positive feelings among the populace. Yes, India is growing fast. If we South Africa were growing as fast as India, I'd be extremely happy. 7-8% growth rates per year. But India is still massively poor. And much of the growth is going towards people that are considered to be billionaires that are in the basically either have Modi in his pocket or on their pockets, or in Modi's pockets. The relationship between Modi, BJP, and some of these billionaires is quite strong. It's so strong, in fact, that when the initial polling numbers were released, that shows that the BJP was likely going to win a huge majority. These share prices, the double-digit share prices of companies owned by these particular set of billionaires, the double-digit share price increases. When news came out that basically the BJP had won, but not by as much, many of these shares fell back, double-digit percentage points. So we're talking about a really strong relationship, at least in the perception of the market, as well as the populace, of the relationship between the BJP and particularly wealthy individuals in India. And so, no one wants to see the world get richer, but they're not getting richer themselves personally, or the world getting richer and somebody else making a lot more money than they are. So that probably did feed into things. Also, to a certain extent, what happened in India is that they had the minority vote kind of coalesce around the alliance, the India Alliance. The minority vote is small in India, it's like 20-something%, but it's all voted around the India Alliance. India Alliance is the opponent alliance. It's weird, but the NDA is the BJP's alliance, and the India is the opposition alliance. So that is the situation there. Politics aside, like I said, BJP is still in power. I think that's going to be something that might change in the next election. Modi is a very strong personality, and he's pretty much the reason that the BJP is doing as well as it is. Once you go beyond him, you find people that may be very competent but don't have anywhere near the charisma he has. And therefore, I think that, considering his age, etc., this might be the last or second last election that the BJP wins based on Modi's name alone. And who knows what happens thereafter. But for now, BJP in power. And then we look at the US elections. Okay, now we know that Donald Trump got just recently convicted of 34 felonies. I personally think this is a really troublesome factor, not because of the conviction, but because of the fact that these things were brought against him in the first place. These are, if I told you what the real crux of the matter is that he was convicted of, you would think it was crazy. Basically, he's convicted of paying a bribe or blackmail money to a former mistress slash adult actress from his own pocket or from the pocket of his business, as opposed to doing it from his campaign. He did not use campaign funds to do this, and the view is that these were actually funds that were used to promote his election, because the bad news around being involved in a relationship with the porn star would have been negative for his election, and therefore this was campaign financing issue, and therefore moved what would be normally a misdemeanor, incorrect reporting of a payment, into a felony, because it's in support of this election interference. So that was the thing. I don't think this is a reasonable thing, and I think it probably needs to be thrown out in appeal. There are 3 other cases against him that some of them have more merit than this does, but they're going to come after the election. Now, what's the impact of this particular event? Now, when it first came out, it was appearing that he lost some votes. It looks like it's pretty clear he lost probably 1% or so, maybe even 2% versus Biden. The problem is that he was so far ahead of Biden, maybe not in the popular vote numbers, but in the electoral vote numbers, that this is not enough. What it also has done is it's somehow galvanized certain groups of really wealthy people in Trump's favor. So you've started to see massive amounts of money flowing into his campaign. In the first couple of days after the verdict came out, he raised $200 million for his campaign. Now, the US campaigns are very, cash intensive, and hundreds of millions of dollars are usually spent. Once you look at the whole campaign, well over $1 billion, a couple $1 billion are spent on each campaign. But generally, good months are like $50-60 million being raised for a month. He did 200 in 2 days. He's done single events since then that have raised $10-12 million in one day for a single event. So yes, he may have lost some, I think, popular vote kind of support, but I think what it's done is it's galvanized his voter base, and which is indicated by this particular rise in funding. And if you look at it overall, you really would prefer to have your voters really motivated to come to the voting booth and vote for you, as opposed to having 1 or 2% more in the overall likely to vote people, because voter turnout is not 100%. There's more probably to be gained by making if you have say 40% of the vote, and they are all really motivated, so 39% of them go and vote for you, or 39% go and vote for you, and then 1% doesn't vote for you because they're too lazy or whatever, as opposed to getting from 40 to 50% and only 60% turnout, because that's going to still be 30% of the electorate is voting for you, as opposed to 39%, even though the overall numbers in your favor have gone up, if you understand what I mean. So the enthusiasm gap, I think, is what's going to be very important for Trump. And I think right now, if you have to look at betting markets and so on, they're putting it like a 6-4, so it's like a 3-2 kind of odds that Trump is going to beat Biden in the election coming up. Of course, there's 5 months to go, and who knows what might happen between then. In fact, it's not actually 3-2. It's 3-2 that Trump wins. Biden does not have that whole 40% for himself. Biden has about 30% for himself winning. There's a 10% chance that they swap out somebody for Biden. So like a 1 in 4 chance that we don't have Biden on the ticket in November, but you have somebody else. Now, this is not as ridiculous as you think. I mean, just on pure numbers and age and so on, there's not an insignificant chance that Biden does not live to the election. For a man of his age and his medical history and so on, that's kind of almost true for Trump as well. He's also an older man. And once you get to the 80s, the next year is not guaranteed. Even the next 5-6 months is not guaranteed. So that's a possibility. There's also the really strong discussion in the US right now that the UK, it calls Biden is too old. There's like some really like ugly memes about him, doing certain things that are considered to be old, etc. I won't go into depth on that, but there's a possibility that if he was swapped out for somebody like, for instance, Michelle Obama, which I think would be the a great choice, quite frankly, or Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, that the Democrats would have a much easier ride to get into the White House. So next, moving on to the AI segment of this particular thing. Now, we've talked about the US a lot in the last little while, and the US pretty much is the center of AI technology. But this week, we're going to talk about China. China came up with a new video program, like Sora from OpenAI. And quite frankly, it looks excellent. It looks quite brilliant. And I think that, the Chinese are not as far behind as some people think. I mean, people are saying the Chinese are 2 years behind, 18 months behind. I doubt they are that far behind. Maybe that far behind in terms of chip technology, in terms of actual, products like capabilities. I don't think they're that far behind. In some cases, I think they might be ahead. The benefits that they have are multiple fold. Firstly, power. These systems that are going to be used to train the new levels of AI are going to require a lot of power. And I mean, talking about power in the level of a US state or a medium-sized, European country level of power, maybe for a data center. This is going to happen in the next couple of years. Microsoft's $100 billion data center is going to require like a large power plant dedicated to itself, like a power plant that would power more than one city, dedicated just to this one, supercomputer, Stargate. So China has that advantage. China also has the advantage that its companies are not restricted when it comes to data. Like Google, for instance, has difficulty even using YouTube data, which it basically controls because of some legal restrictions. OpenAI has its restrictions with regards to what kind of data it can use. These Chinese companies have no such restrictions. Okay. The negatives against the Chinese are the fact that they don't have access to the highest end chips, but recently it came out they're sitting about $50 billion getting into the next chip, or trying to upgrade their chip capacity. Now, 50 billion is a lot of money, but remember, NVIDIA, which is the big AI chip company out there, is what, 3 trillion. That's 3,000 billion. So 50 versus 3,000, there's a difference in that. But still, it does indicate that there is, moves in China to do something. You might even say that 50 million in China, or 50 billion in China, is probably worth closer to like 150 billion in the US because of differences in income levels and, costs and so on. But it's still a big gap between them and, the top leader in the chip manufacturers that we have is NVIDIA. But I don't doubt that the Chinese will be able to catch up, at least close the gap with from what it currently is with the US. And the advantages they have may be some significant advantages, especially the data advantage, I think. If you're looking at some of the predictions out there around what's bottlenecking AI into the future, a lot of it revolves around the data wall, the ability to collect data, the ability to use data to train some of these models. And I think that the Chinese, like I said, don't have those problems. Now, what does this mean for the world? Look, if we believe in AI, really, if you think that AI is going to be the future, and we take the forecast reasonably, seriously, looking at the gap from 3 to 4, GPT-3, GPT-4, is like moving from a preschooler to a high school student in terms of capability. That would mean that we'd expect something closer to a college student for GPT-5 and maybe closer to a PhD by GPT-6. Being able to basically have a PhD level mind running, something in say 2 or 3 years' time for the cost of the electricity and the computer chip that you're using is going to be incredibly, incredibly disruptive. And we are likely to enter a scenario where we do see more and more government intervention in these kind of industries because, when you have this kind of disruption, there's no way sovereign power states basically allow them to run without control. I think the analogy would be nuclear power. Once it became clear that that nuclear bombs were viable, they became state secrets. You could work on them, but you couldn't just work on them, as a private company. You can't just get a startup that's creating nuclear power. You have to have approval from certain agencies. And I think that's what's going to be happening with AI going forward as well. So that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. And we also did an AI seminar this week, as well as a election special. And I think if you are more interested in those particular topics, it might be worth looking at those. And they'll be on our YouTube channel as well. Cheers.